WEFUNK. We funk.
But ironically enough, with the whole Mike Tyson Roy Jones Jr. fight announcement over the last month, very ironic, as I did have planned actually for today's little special feature on the show. I did have planned a Mike Tyson celebration of sorts already. So very apropos that we talk about the Mike Tyson exhibition fight comeback, because on today's show we're going to be taking a look at the first Mike Tyson comeback, which was 25 years ago next week. And on this episode of Big LW's KO Cast, we take a look back at He's Back. Tyson-McNeely, 25 years later, as it was August 19th, 1995, at the MGM in Vegas, that Mike Tyson made his return to the sport after the most infamous layoff in boxing since Ali. Although for very different circumstances, obviously, as we detailed last week. And definitely check out the YouTube page for Big LW's KO Cast inaugural inductee ceremony, where I got into Ali's whole exile situation. Tyson, however, a very different story. And I guess we will start the tale, I guess, as we always do when we talk about the second era of the Tyson career. But I guess we'll start on February 12th, 1990, which is, of course, the morning that Tyson woke up after losing to Buster Douglas in the Tokyo Dome in one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. All right, so that's February of 90. Throughout the rest of the year, 2 first-round knockout wins in June and December. Getting back on the right track, hot on the pursuit to retain his unified titles, which by the end of 1990 were now around the waist of Evander Holyfield, who beat Buster Douglas by the in the end of 1990. All right. So 1991, with all things leading to the epic Holyfield-Tyson mega fight. Contractual issues kind of hold things up, and Tyson goes on his way to fight actually what turns out to be 2 fights with the, at the time, number 2 contender to Tyson's number 1 contender to Holyfield's champion. All right, so Tyson and Razor Ruddock go at it, the number 1 and 2 contenders for Holyfield's championship. The first match ended with the whole controversial stoppage, however, with the ref getting stormed out of the ring, and Tyson was going to knock him out eventually anyway. However, the controversial stoppage in the first fight led to a rematch with Razor Ruddock rather than the matchup with Evander Holyfield. However, after a unanimous decision victory in the rematch in June, it officially finally set up the mega fight at the heavyweight division, with Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield all set to square off November 8th, 1991, in what truly would be one of the all-time biggest fights and a matchup of heavyweights in the history of the sport. Ali, Frazier, Norton Holmes, Foreman Lyle, whatever heavy fight you want to put up there, the November 91 matchup between Iron Mike in his prime and the real deal Holyfield, who by this point in November of 91 was 26-0, the undisputed heavyweight champion after beating Buster Douglas, like I said, at the end of 90. All right. Add to that, to the resume, of course, bronze medalist in the 1984 Olympics, went on to be the all-time youngest undisputed cruiserweight champion, now an undisputed heavyweight champion, so undisputed champion at 2 divisions, Olympic bronze medalist, 26-0, versus Iron Mike Tyson, who at this point is an absolute icon in sports. Obviously, the blip on the record in the Buster Douglas whole debacle, but he's still in his early to mid 20s, prime of his career, looking to reclaim not only his titles but his spot as really one of the all-time greats in the history of the sport, as GOAT status would be on the line for a mega fight like that, which, like I mentioned, was all set to take place November of 91. However, of course, as we all know, shortly after the whole fight announcement, Mike Tyson arrested on rape charges of an 18-year-old Desiree Washington, all right, in July of 91, okay, February of 92, convicted, sentenced to 6 years in March, and one of the all-time best, and without question, one of the all-time most exciting, electrifying, interesting, iconic careers in all of sports, was very much in question. As, like I just said, however, still in his mid-20s, 26 at time of sentencing, so 6 years at most. So do the math. He's going to get out with, some good time left in his career. As well, I guess, one of the things that almost worked in Tyson's advantage in some ways, at least in the, court of public opinion. Not in the court of public opinion about whether he was innocent or guilty of the said charges, which he, of course, always denied. But I guess really, in a lot of ways, a double-edged sword, because the same reputation that would kind of, lead, your average, your average American Joe sports fan out there to potentially think that this obvious maniac, Mike Tyson, potentially did, in fact, commit the crime. The same kind of reputation of just an absolute, animalistic, scary dude would really help in a lot of ways, however, his, comeback after release from, because this is already kind of how Mike Tyson was looked at by the mainstream American sports fan, or the mainstream sports fan at this point in 1992 anyway, as even as like a professional athlete, Mike Tyson wasn't, Michael Jordan, all right, and all the Gatorade commercials and smiling on the Hanes ads. He wasn't even, hilariously enough, he wasn't even OJ, who in 1992 was in the Hertz commercials and wearing gloves on the sideline of the NFL, but he wasn't a nice and friendly and classy and educated. He wasn't anything positive before the rape conviction, okay? As he was always, like I said, that caged raged pit bull off his leash, just you believed him to be the baddest man on earth. Right. So when he was paroled after 3 years, I guess a little less than 3 years in March of 95, which was, I guess, roughly the same age as well as Ali, who was exiled from the sport for obviously not going, refusing to go to the Vietnam War whole situation. But Ali was pretty much the same age as Tyson, pretty much spent the same amount of time out of the sport as Tyson. Okay, so for a little bit of a sample size of a boxer returning off a layoff in his prime, and as well, while Tyson in jail, 45-year-old George Foreman became the oldest heavyweight in the history of the sport. Okay, so with both of those things kind of fresh on your mind, there's no question that physically Mike Tyson would be able to come back after the long laugh in his prime. His image as an animal has now only been enhanced with George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, as well as, Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis, and all of the great 90s heavyweights. You're in a true golden age of competition for Mike Tyson, and everyone in the world wanted to see what happens next in the Phase 2 of the Mike Tyson career. Right. I guess as well, while Tyson away, OJ murdered his wife and MJ retired amid some cloudy gambling allegations. Right. So I guess how the tables have turned on the American sports fan public. However, Tyson now officially starting the comeback trail. And I guess we really all know about ultimately what happens next in the Phase 2 and the next era of the Mike Tyson career. Of course, there were highs, a lot of lows, but there were highs. Of course, he did ultimately regain his straps versus Frank Bruno in March of 96. However, of course, all of that overshadowed by, of course, losses to Holyfield and Lewis, and, of course, later on, McBride and the whole Danny Williams debacle. But I guess even more importantly than that, truly overshadowed by ear bites and face tattoos, in the ring and out of the ring meltdowns, and ramblings of a psychopath in the ring and out of the ring. And I guess really the Phase 3 of the Tyson career, which we've talked about at times on the show, and we'll get into, leading up to the whole Roy Jones Jr. whole situation. But the post-fight career of Mike Tyson, since hanging up the boots and starring in comedy films and really owning being just the maniac, just the man who he was in general, both in the ring and out of the ring. And we'll talk about all that in future Tyson and we'll talk about all of that, like I said, in the future episodes leading up to the ultimate comeback exhibition fight. However, on August 19th, 1995, and I guess the 3 to 4 months leading up to the comeback fight, Goatness was still officially on the table, and must-see TV wasn't just Jerry and Joey on Thursday nights on NBC, because Tyson-McNeely, he's back, was also must-see TV. And it was so must-see TV that it was must-seen by a all-time record 1.5 million pay-per-view buys, earning more than $60 million in the States, $90 million worldwide, setting viewership and revenue records. All with Don King, whom Tyson decided to stay with, of course, despite converting to Islam, kept Don King, which was, I guess, his first mistake. But I guess the with more excitement than any fighter since Jack Dempsey behind him, the whole world turned in to see the first glimpse of Iron Mike in 3 years, as well as their first glimpse of someone that nobody on the planet outside of Medford had ever heard of. As, of course, the opponent for the evening's affair would, of course, be the Hurricane Peter McNeely from Medford, Mass. And on Saturday night, he's gonna kick Tyson's, of course, McNeely coming in full effect with all sorts of hilarious nursery-style rhymes. Defo filled the bill as, like, the great white hope kind of scenario, and a lot of reasons, I guess. First of all, despite the fact that he was 36-1, he was still largely unknown, however, wildly entertaining, like I said, not just with the hilarious nursery rhymes, but as well for his Boston brawler kind of style, a heavyweight Mickey Ward that in the lead-up promised to take it to Tyson, and if he was going out, he was losing in a slug fight, but he was going to bully the bully and wrap Tyson up in his cocoon that he threatened, that he talked about leading up to the fight. So really, he was doing a great job at talking trash to help with the pay-per-view. As well, he had, like, his hilarious, like, Snubby, or whoever, like, his Mick from Rocky, like, a style, like, a mentor whom the fight was an honor to. But he had a lot of reasons to love him, especially if you're a Boston sports fan, if you catch my drift. Right. And are potentially looking for a reason to root against a convicted rapist. All right. The Great White Hope, Peter McNeely, the Boston Slugger, was earning his right into the losing corner. But I guess just in terms of a fight, and in terms of a fight experience, in terms of a promotional angle, and in terms of the 1.5 million pay-per-view buys and all, talk about a win-win with the matchup. As of course, I mean, Tyson already kind of has, like, the built-in, a gladiator getting thrown to the lions reputation for his fights anyway, where you're not tuning in. Once again, you're not tuning in to see if Tyson will knock this guy out, but when Tyson knocks this guy out. All right. And I guess, enhanced a little bit with the curiosity after the prison sentence. I'm sure that did turn off some pay-per-view buys, but I'm sure intrigued a lot more. All right. And I mean, really, like I said, just for a fight experience, it's a win-win. If he KOs him in the first minutes, it's hilarious. If McNeely hangs in there for a couple rounds even, it's a great upset and a real win for the Joe Plumber out there. All right. And if you get more than anything, it's like an absolute shock to the customers. So it's a perfect spectacle event, a must-watch night of sports for much more than just sports fans as well, with, Tyson's just a place in mainstream culture at this point in the, early to mid-90s, all for a fight where the outcome ultimately will take backseat to what leads up to it. And the who's gonna win is a second story to what's gonna happen next when Iron Mike makes his return. And if memory serves me correct, I watched in the front room of one of my childhood best friend Mike Jacobson's house. However, I could be wrong, because I was 12 years old and about a month shy of 7th grade, so it's all a little hazy. But I do definitely remember, however, Mike's older brother Tommy going crazy during one of the iconic images from that fight, which was the eyes of Mike Tyson locked into Peter McNeely, following him back and forth as McNeely bobbed right to left during the pre-fight instructions, and there wasn't a chance on the planet McNeely survived the first round. Just looking in the eyes of Tyson, who had waited 3 years to knock out some hilarious white guy, and we were gonna get down to business. And for me personally as well, like I said, I was 12 years old in August of 95, so I guess subtract that by 3 years. That would make me 9. Okay, 8 in March before May. So when Mike Tyson was sentenced in March of 92, I was an 8-year-old kid. Okay, so for me, Mike Tyson was really my first time getting to watch like a live Mike Tyson fight, at least at the mature age of 12, of course, you know. But I mean, for me, honestly, it's just like, you know, of course, one of the all-time biggest names and personalities and just figures in all of sports history. All right, but you know, as a 12-year-old from the suburbs, here's the guy. Really, all I know about him is the highlight reel, you know, knockouts and whatnot that you've seen. All right, now he's fresh out of prison on rape, and in the middle of the ring with his eyes following this poor white guy that's about to get murdered. And it was the real life feeling that can only be delivered by Iron Mike Tyson. That blink and you'll miss it, must-see energy and excitement that are literally things of sports legend from Mike Tyson, live and direct. And like I said, when you saw the eyes, you knew it was going to happen. And within 10 seconds of the fight, down goes McNeely, who did what he said, much like Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder, did what he said, promised to come out swinging, and he did just that for the first 9 seconds, of course that is, until Tyson caught him with the strike and put him down. However, McNeely popping right back up, ready to get back at it for now. Because it wouldn't be much longer for McNeely, who was more surviving than fighting for the next minute or so, ultimately getting rocked by an uppercut that Tyson was queuing up from a mile away, and really, I guess actually, McNeely did physically return to his feet, but the Judge Mills Lane, the future judge, but the Mills Lane 10 count interrupted by the McNeely corner, who ran into the ring to stop the fight because they knew what we all knew when we saw the eyes. They saw the eyes. They knew it was going to happen. But officially a knockout in the return to ring for Mike Tyson. And after 3 years of prison, 3 months of hype, and 1:30 of action, it was the first win in over 4 years for Iron Mike. And more importantly, I got to watch it. Which, I guess, looking back all these years later, really as well, like I said, I didn't really realize it as a 12-year-old, but I didn't realize how, you know, fully in control of GOAT status, like I said, and just really how fully in control of the second half of his career Tyson really potentially could have been. Of course, you know, if Gus was still around and Don King was not, who knows what could have happened in that second half of Tyson's career if, you know, if he would have stuck with the Islamic leadership, even if he would have stuck with the Islamic leadership of Ali, you know, it could have turned out a lot different. Then, of course, with Don King, however, you know, as a kid, it kind of already felt like that freak factor sideshow quality in his comeback, and especially, you know, I guess, really with hindsight being kind of blurred by all of the craziness and, you know, the KOs and just everything that happened afterwards. You know, it's kind of easy to forget that when Tyson came came back in August of 95 against Peter McNeely. Tyson was 42-1, not yet 30, still the most feared man in all of sports, and the biggest draw, really in all of sports, especially with MJ on retirement. But I guess MJ would return, and you're talking about the two icons of the era, right there between Jordan and Tyson, the respective Michaels. We can even throw Jackson in there in 95, and you've got the real trifecta of great Mikes. But I guess here as we sit, 25 years later, a lot has changed. However, we prepare for a exhibition matchup versus another great from the 90s, but Roy Jones Jr., and despite all of the shenanigans and all of the nuttiness and the movies and the medication and the cartoons and the craziness, 25 years later, much like Michael Jordan and The Last Dance being one of the all-time most successful documentaries, still must-see TV. And still the most entertaining and electrifying, interesting, and iconic figure in the sport of boxing since Kid Dynamite arrived in 1985.
WEFUNK. We funk.